It is time for us to return to this corner where there is ketchup in order to catch up on the 2024 releases. I'm going to pretend that sentence made sense. Alright, before we get started, as always, a quick thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. And if you enjoy the content I make and would like to offer your support, then for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name listed right here at the start of every video. Link to that is in the description below. And now, on to the first film.
Come on! Riley means us. Have I ever steered you wrong before?
Many times.
Inside Out 2 is the sequel to the 2015 Pixar film and continues the story of Riley, who is now entering her teenage years, but the emotions in her mind are thrown a curveball when not only the puberty alarm goes off and Riley's emotional state starts getting more pronounced, but suddenly the appearance of 4 new emotions in headquarters, including one named anxiety, greatly upsets the status quo. I'll be perfectly honest, I was one of those people who, when this film was announced, I wasn't terribly optimistic. Every single news that I was hearing about this film, from 2 of the original voice actors not coming back, the fact that this film was announced along with a slew of other Disney sequels during a time when Disney was really struggling financially, really made me think that this was being made just for the sake of being made, not because there was really a story worth telling here. So I wasn't exactly doing cartwheels at this film's existence. But finally, after checking it out, pretty much all of my reservations and cynicism melted away. Now, this isn't as strong or as fantastic as the first film, but that's basically asking them to make lightning strike twice. But for a follow-up to such a brilliant emotional film, it does a really good job. For one thing, it actually does what a sequel is supposed to do. It doesn't just repeat character arcs that were already handled in the first film, but the story is actually continued. Joy, for instance, actually tries to make more of an effort to include all the emotions and take their input rather than just trying to run everything herself. In fact, the lesson and the arcs that the emotions go through in this film is entirely different. And it really feels like they're actually building on top of the world that was set up in the first film. And the film can actually get away with this for the most part because you could make the argument that as Riley gets older and gets more mature, more things start happening inside her mind. For instance, now we actually get to see her sense of self, and that helps form Riley's beliefs, which is not only an attempt to be a little bit more psychiatrically accurate, but it's also done to give Riley a little bit more of a sense of autonomy, which is directly dealing with the complaint that some people had with the first film. And Riley really is shaping up to be one of the more complex characters in all of Pixar's catalog. Because the film is literally taking place inside her mind, that means the writers had to put in a lot of work into making her feel like a full-fledged 3-dimensional character. We get to understand her thought process for why she does the things she does and what her motivations are. And when she does something or is tempted to do something that we know that she shouldn't do, we empathize with her because we know her mind so well that we completely understand her actions without necessarily excusing them. Just like the first film, this could be used as a great tool to try to get young people to understand a little bit better what they're going through, or for others to understand what other people have or are going through. In my opinion, this film tackles female puberty so much better than Pixar previously did in Turning Red, where there I thought the metaphor really didn't work and I found the style extremely obnoxious and off-putting. This film is way more approachable, but without sacrificing the harsh reality, and in fact, I would argue in this film it's handled far more maturely. And even from an aesthetic and surface level viewpoint, this film is great. Unsurprisingly for a Pixar film, it looks immaculate. It's paced well, the comedy in this is also really good. In fact, I think it's even funnier than the first film. There's a character that's meant to be a take that against those cutesy preschool shows where they try to interact with the audience. That was really funny. And because in this film the 5 main emotions are actually together for a large chunk of the runtime, they're actually able to bounce off of each other more. And the new emotions are just incredibly well designed. What I love is that you can tell what their deal is just by looking at them, and the way they handle themselves when they move. And the film does crescendo to a very well done and emotionally packed climax, including a scene that tries to convey not only how an anxiety attack feels to the person experiencing it, but also what it feels like inside their minds while it's happening. Now, the emotional punch isn't quite as strong as the ending of the first film, but it definitely approaches it. Now, there are issues with the film. This isn't completely perfect or polished filmmaking. There are some inconsistencies with the world building established in the first film, like the 4 new emotions being there that the film doesn't really address aside from a quick hand wave joke near the end, or the fact that Dream Duty, I guess, doesn't exist anymore. They never really explain that. And there is this general sense of sameness with the plot. I mean, the premise is yet another joy and such emotions are separated from headquarters and have to make their way back in order to make things right plot. So some parts of this do have a sense of deja vu. But generally, these are pretty minor complaints, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this film. This is the best non-Toy Story sequel that Pixar has ever made, and the last 15 to 20 minutes is just sheer excellence. It speaks to both the teens going through these strange new emotions and experiences, and to the adults that have already gone through this. Pixar has been a little bit more inconsistent as of late, especially compared to their Platinum era, but man, when they have a great product, they're still capable of delivering some real highs. Inside Out 2 gets a full shot.
If she can convince them that something happened between us, I could lose my job.
It's not all you could lose.
You're gonna ruin his life.
Miller's Girl tells the story of a high schooler named Cairo Sweet, yes, really, played by Jenna Ortega, who, tell me if this sounds familiar, is a super smart bookworm who loves writing and literature and is leagues ahead of her peers. You could say that she's not like other girls. Anyway, she has a thing for her writing teacher, played by Martin Freeman, and she decides to make it her goal to seduce him away from his wife, or else. So, you've probably already gleaned from my summary what the big problem with this film is. This entire thing is littered from head to toe with cliches that you've seen before and seen done better. But really, that doesn't even scratch the surface for what's wrong with this film. The entire thing has this aura that it thinks it is so artful and deep and complex, with overly pretentious lines of purple prose that is attempting to disguise just how thin the story and characterization actually is. Almost like it thinks that by name-dropping literary classics, that somehow those stories' goodness will rub off on this. Everything feels like it was written by a teenage girl that had some kind of vendetta against her teacher, but who doesn't actually have any real-life experiences, and so wasn't disciplined enough to actually know when a line is too bad and it needed to be cut, or keep the characterizations consistent from scene to scene. I was absolutely stupefied by what I was witnessing unfold on the screen. Were the people involved with this proud of what they were shooting at the end of the day? I genuinely don't even understand how this film got made. I actually made the assumption that this was based on a novel, or more accurately, a Wattpad story, but as far as I can tell, that isn't the case. This is an original script from Jade Haley Bartlett, who had 0 writing credits to her name prior to this. How this screenplay got in the hands of Seth Rogen and his production company is something that will probably elude me forever. Oh, and Bartlett also directed the film as well, despite not having a directing credit to her name either, because why not? And yeah, watching the film, you can tell this was directed by a neophyte. Everything is so flat and stiff, and everyone just seems uncomfortable with what they're being asked to do. Like, it genuinely seems like all these actors were lied to about what kind of film this was, and were just trying to get through this with as little embarrassment as possible. This film so absolutely, desperately wants to be an erotic film. And maybe a better director could have found the eroticism within the material, like Paul Verhoeven or Luca Guadagnino. But it certainly wasn't going to be found with this director, and most definitely not with this script. The only real positive I can say is that Gideon Adlin is trying her hardest, and I have to give massive props to her for trying to make this role work, even when she has to say some of the most laughable, ridiculous lines she'll probably ever have to say in her career. Hopefully she managed to get out of this unscathed. But yeah, try as she might, there is just no salvaging this stinker. Miller's Girl gets an empty shot.
Go, 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 go!
God bless America.
Civil War is the newest film from Alex Garland and takes place in a not too distant future where the US has broken apart into a second civil war, and a group of photojournalists, one of them played by Kirsten Dunst, are traveling to DC to interview the President of the United States, and along the way come across several different factions, all of whom have been affected by the ongoing turmoil. I'll admit, a part of me was very nervous about this film coming out now, during a time in American history where the population is genuinely divisive, and to have this come out in an election year could have felt like throwing gasoline on an already volatile situation. But I needn't have worried, because not only does this film not do that, it actually has kind of the reverse problem, and that this film feels so sanitized and apolitical in an attempt to appeal to a mass market that I just couldn't connect with the conflict. For example, we never really find out definitively what exactly the Civil War is being fought over. I think they're hinting that the president has turned into some kind of dictator, but the film doesn't exactly make that clear. And even then, that alone wouldn't really explain why the US split into 4 different factions rather than just 2. And yes, it is hilarious that in this film's universe, Texas and California have joined forces to become a separate country all on its own. That's probably the most unrealistic part of the entire film. Now, I get what this film is trying to do. The film is trying to put you in as much of a neutral state as possible, because the film is actually supposed to be a love letter to old-fashioned, on-the-ground photojournalism. And they say the mark of a good photojournalist is remaining as neutral as possible. You're there simply to report what's happening, not comment on it. So to avoid the audience actually taking a side in this war, they're trying to keep what's going on as vague and ambiguous as possible. But because I didn't know what anybody was fighting for, I didn't really care what happened to this world. It just felt like a staggering miscalculation. The film's climax is pretty much entirely 2 factions of the US Army fighting against each other, and the action scenes are intense and brutal and bloody and all that good stuff. But since I didn't know what they were fighting for, I can't get invested in the actual battle scenes. And the structure seems like it would fit more at home as a mini-series rather than a film. The journalists we follow are traveling to DC, and they make stops and come across different factions, each of them having a different reaction to the Civil War surrounding them. Each one of them could have been the focus of an entire episode, and it could have really fleshed out this world and really made you care by the time we get to the big climax. But instead, we're given what's essentially a road trip movie disguised as an alternate history cautionary tale. It has great elements to it, like the acting's fine, and like I said, the action is well done and intense, but I just walked away feeling so disappointed, like they had wasted a decent concept. It's like it was trying to play to both the mainstream crowd and the art house crowd, so it doesn't really feel much like either, and that's a shame. Civil War gets a half-empty shot.
We are going to save this girl, you hear me?
We're gonna need a lot of shovels.
This is our last chance. If we don't take it, Michelle dies.
How did it become your responsibility to save her?
Because I'm here, because I can.
Ordinary Angels tells the true story of a hairdresser named Sharon Stevens, played by Hilary Swank, who takes it upon herself to help out a widower, played by Alan Ritchson, who is struggling immensely to not only deal with the death of his wife, but also his critically ill 5-year-old daughter, who desperately needs a liver transplant soon if she's expected to survive. Faith-based films have been a primordial punching bag of the internet for quite some time, and it wasn't without cause. But lately, it seems like faith-based films have been stepping it up a notch. Even with films that I didn't think really fully worked, like Jesus Revolution, I could at least acknowledge that it was acted, directed, and shot like an actual professional movie, not something that looks like it was written and shot in a church basement. And I think the big difference is where they're putting the focus. In many of the ones that completely fail, the movies are about faith and religion, and story and characters are secondary. But in movies like these, the story and characters are the center, and the faith and religious elements are the added flavors. This is a movie about characters that just so happen to be religious, and I think that's the key difference. And as a film about a young sick child needing some kind of emergency transplant in order to be saved, this is one of the better examples of that plot. Put in the wrong hands, this could have gone terribly, disastrously wrong. It could have easily come across as cloying or as a cheap way to score sympathy points. Thankfully, the film's tone is able to balance things out very well. It's not afraid to throw in a few funny moments to both lighten the mood and to prevent it from taking itself too seriously, but without stepping on the tragedy of the situation, which I think is helped by the well-written script penned by both Meg Tilly and Kelly Fremont Craig of Edge of 17 and Are You There God? It's Me Margaret fame. Hilary Swank does a good job playing an Aaron Brockovich type character who, mishandled, could have gotten annoying very quickly, but she knows just how far she can push it. But Alan Ritchson is also very good as the dour widower who just seems lost and doesn't know what to do, but is still trying to hold things together for his daughters. And I really liked this film's portrayal of community and how, when a family is in crisis, a community is supposed to come together and help whenever they can. And the drama that we see unfold, while nothing all that original, for the most part doesn't feel phony or artificial. Now, the handling of the material is still relatively standard. It doesn't quite push the material as far as I would like to really give this more memorability. And every once in a while, the drama can become overwrought, but not often, and it's usually able to bring it down to earth pretty quickly. Overall, this is just a good movie. If you're one of those people that just wants nothing to do with the film with this setup, I don't think this is necessarily going to sway you over, but if you're even the tiniest bit curious about it, I say give it a watch. It is definitely worth a look. Ordinary Angels gets a half full shot. Sasquatch Sunset tells the story of, well, a family of Sasquatches and just all the misadventures they have over the span of about a year or so. There are some movies where the very existence of it is simply befuddling. Something you know that only truly bold filmmakers would even think about making, let alone actually bringing it to the silver screen. And Sasquatch Sunset is one of those films. I was not surprised to learn that this was an extremely common occurrence for people to walk out of screenings to this film. But why? What is it about this film that made audiences so upset? Well, the entire film, and I mean the entire film, is watching actors in Sasquatch suits, who I need to remind you, don't talk, just doing random and or disgusting things. They do things like counting with their fingers, grunting, drinking breast milk from a lactating female Sasquatch, urinating, defecating, copulating, or sniffing their own genitalia. And if you're waiting for some kind of story or point to come out of any of this, then you're going to be waiting the entire runtime because it never comes. The entire thing feels like this is just one big troll movie. A movie that feels like it was made just because the filmmakers could make it. A joke where the punchline is known only to the filmmakers. Which, by the way, I should point out that this movie had a whopping 37 producer and executive producer credits on it. And I credit every single one of them for being willing to put their name on it. Like, 2 of the Sasquatches are played by Jesse Eisenberg and Riley Keough. There's no reason why. You would never be able to tell it's them unless you were told it. The roles could have been played by anyone. Again, that feels like some kind of joke that is only privy to the people that actually made it. Now, some critics are calling this film an absurdist masterpiece, saying that this film is a rumination on what it means to be alive, how the film seeks to capture all elements of the human condition, even the disgusting ones. I think they are grossly, emphasis on gross, overstating what this is and giving it way too much credit. At least you could say it's a parody of those kind of existentialist films, but I seriously doubt that a film where the main characters are eating fish droppings is trying to say anything deep or profound. I did find the movie kinda sort of amusing in an odd, I can't believe this exists kinda way, but that's a joke that runs out its welcome very quickly, and it's not enough to sustain a full 90-minute runtime. This could maybe work as a 20-minute short film, but even then, that's a big maybe. I mean, for what it's trying to do, it is shot well with some nice nature shots, and I give the filmmakers credit for going all out on this concept. They had a vision of what they wanted, and they put it out there for the whole world to see, unfettered by the studio system in Hollywood. I just think the vision was misguided, and I think most people that do decide to watch this are going to be turned off by what it's trying to do. And let's be honest, turn it off by the half-hour mark, if not sooner. Me personally, I was mostly just bored by it after the first 15 minutes or so. Sasquatch Sunset gets a begrudging half-empty shot. And I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. If there are any 2024 films that you wanted me to take a stab at, or you're just curious about what I thought of it, then feel free to let me know in ye old comment section down below. And you can catch more of my reviews over on my Letterboxd page. The link to that is in the description below. And as always, a thank you once again to my beautiful patrons over on Patreon. Your support really does mean the world to me. And make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any future reviews. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.